In this video, I want to speak a little bit about, suppose we could call it political polarization to some extent. I don't want to exaggerate. My channel's name is Centrist Philosopher. I've been actually musing on possibly changing that name, but that would obviously be a big step, and I would certainly make a video explaining if I do decide to do that. But the centrist bit would certainly be part that I would keep because it's something I've always been comfortable describing myself as. It's something that I've always felt, yeah, this pretty much sums up where I am. And just to quickly explain that, if you are new to the channel and you're not, maybe you wonder why I use that term. I look at my positions in a whole wide range of issues. I'm a pretty political person, so I look at my views, my approaches in a whole wide range of issues, and overall it comes into the center because I could have conservative views on one thing, more left leaning views on another. And if those views are not across the board, then it's hard to say that I'm a conservative or I'm a left leaning person. So it makes more sense and it's more applicable to say, actually, I'm a centrist. To use American vernacular, I guess I'd be called a moderate. Um, I know it's not an ideal term, it can be a little bit vague, but I'm happy with it. I think it's appropriate for what I am. But it does carry a certain degree of loneliness, and I want to quantify this because I know there's other moderates out there. There's other people whose politics would be sort of middle ground. So I'm by no means suggesting that you know, that isn't the case or I'm the only one or something. But often I see that the strength of partisan feeling is such that if you don't go into that way of thinking, then you're immediately deemed to be the other side. I've had people I was connected with have disconnected from me because they interpreted something I said and they didn't like it, and they obviously just rushed to judgment about a whole swathe of things, even though irritatingly in those cases it bothered me because I knew those people had seen my whole record or they'd seen other aspects of what so they couldn't have pigeonholed me as being one way or the other. An example being I had a left wing friend contact and I was criticizing woke ideology and she immediately must have assumed, oh, I'm suddenly a right winger. Now that bothered me because she knows full well that I've taken left leaning positions. And likewise, I've had people on the right accused me of being a leftist. I actually got targeted in a group the other day um, by a long-standing member, although I've been there longer than she has. That's beside the point. But this was someone I had been connected with briefly, sort of an online acquaintance, and she got into this deranged tirade, is the only way I could describe it, about who I am and what I represent. And it's the internet. On some level, I'm used to that sort of thing. It comes with the territory. But she decided to get into very personal things. She brought in people close to me, which I thought was disgusting. Anyway, the reason I mention that is that would be an example because the comment that she was responding to was actually very balanced. Um, Somehow she took that as an opportunity to it's not even like I was coming out with a particularly left wing position. It was a pretty middle ground position, but you just got into this deranged tirade. Um, and it wasn't just strong disagreement, it was really, it crossed the line. Um, the admin took action against her, but that's a whole drama in of itself. Um, the point I'm making here is if you're like me, you identify with the political center, you'll notice that it can be difficult um, to kind of find a home because I'm not necessarily talking in party politics. Although I mean, I certainly would have no interest in joining today's Conservative Party, but I wouldn't be in a rush to join Labour either. Um, I still don't entirely trust Starmer's party regarding identity politics and issues around that. I'm very unhappy with Vivek Cooper pushing the police to, increase monitoring of non-crime hate incidents and things like that. That's maybe more for politics. What I'm talking about here is, put it this way, I really dislike woke ideology, but I know if I were to talk about that, left-leaning people would say I'm just a reactionary right-winger, even though there are many people that dislike that sort of way of thinking. And I've always said I think the left is fairly hypocritical with this because they don't like woke ideology being mocked and critiqued. Yet it was the left that came up with the term woke in the first place. This is something that's conveniently forgotten. The term woke was developed by the political left in the 70s to be awoken to injustice. That's where it came from. I think it originated in the African American community in that era. Um, so it comes from the left, and yet when it's critiqued today, the left make it, oh, it's an awful term. It's right wing reactionaries. It's people who don't like progress. So they don't like the fact that the word that they developed is now being critiqued. Well, if the word is valid to begin with, then it's a word. So you can't say, oh, don't use that word. That's ridiculous. Um, so I wish the left was a little bit more honest in ownership of the word. Like, promote wokeism, if you will, but don't then say it's an invalid term when it's criticized. That's a bit like saying, you know, oh, socialist is used as a term of critique. I accept that sometimes words can be misplaced in criticism, absolutely, but don't try to pretend that a word doesn't exist just because you don't like it suddenly come under scrutiny. That's the point you're making. So I don't like the left's attitude to that because there is, frankly, some excesses of woke thinking which is deeply intolerant, incredibly shackling in terms of basic communication. Um, and it's very polarizing. Now, I think there will be people who come to this channel with a preconceived idea, or not preconceived, rather, they've seen one or two videos where I have strong views on a particular subject, and they're assuming that I sway one way. Now, I understand the nature of the internet. I understand that I'll make a video and a lot of people will not watch the whole video, and that's fine. You know, I'm guilty of that myself. I go to videos, watch a couple of minutes, and trail off, okay? So I've no problem with that. But I do have a problem if people subscribe and then put certain expectations on me when I've done no such thing myself. I've always been upfront about my positions. So, as an example, I could be criticizing Trump. I've made no secret I cannot stand Trump. I think he is a threat to democracy. So I'll be talking about that subject, and they then assume I must be on the left. And then I make a video, for example, criticizing woke ideology, and then they'll somehow feel betrayed. Oh, we thought you were one of us, kind of thing. I'm not saying this has happened a lot, but it's happened a few times. Um, and this is the thing about being in the center. You end up with both sides sort of saying or acting like you've betrayed them. I've heard this insane argument that centrism is really just conservative light. Um, well, I would say this: if the sort of intolerance of woke ideology has pushed people more to the right, then they've only themselves to blame. You know, if you put people in this pedestal where they don't exactly agree with you on every issue, then then they're the enemy. That's really intolerant. Um, I think, you know, it's fine to say, okay, we're going to disagree on this issue. And I admit there's certain issues that I feel very, very strongly about. I mean, I wouldn't give the time of day to someone who is advocating for Putin, for example, because to me, that goes well beyond any domestic policy differences. That is something that is about, frankly, national security. I just think it's so I'm not going to say I'm this harmonious sort of person. So let's just agree to disagree. I have a very clear idea of what I believe in and what I do not want to endorse. Um, and people have absolutely every right to disagree with me. But I'm just trying to express here that if you're in the political center, one thing I think is fair to say that centrists try their very level best to do is be consistent in values. It's one thing I like about the center ground because I know for a fact that if I think something is wrong, I'm going to call it out, whether it comes from the left or the right. Whereas I think people who kind of attach themselves to one or the other get tribalized. They feel that they have to criticize just for the sake of it. I've seen conservatives who will attack the left just for being left, not even on any specifics. The left do the same thing. So that sort of tribalization, I think, is unfortunate. Um, I'm not saying that only the centre have common sense. I agree with positions on the left, I agree with positions on the right, but I am saying that if you're in the centre ground, it can be a bit lonely because it's difficult to find this little tribal grouping. It's difficult to find that partisan camp because by nature, centrism isn't about that. It's about trying to think objectively, it's about trying to be consistent, and it's about your overall positions. This is how I would describe it. Your overall positions roughly getting into a center point. It doesn't mean that all your positions are going to be that way. You could be a centrist and have right wing views on crime, but left wing views on, I don't know, abortion. Could be anything, right? So, and here's the thing, there'll be other centrist leaning people that you disagree with. There may be a centrist, for example, who is a centrist because they've used the same methodology that I have, but I have very different views on them on crime, for example. They're still a centrist because they wouldn't like more hard left positions in other areas. So I accept that the term centrist can be a bit vague. I do accept that. But if it's anything, what it is not being tribalized, refusing to be in the sort of groupings of I'm a conservative or I'm a left-leaning person. It's refusing to go down that line and just saying this is what I believe. Um, and I really need the bathroom, so I'm just going to wrap this up. That's how I feel about it. Thanks for watching.